Okay. Yeah, so I thought. What have they noticed?
Present our existing.
Yeah.
Rather than just going with the. Now, that being said, there's the argument that this needs to be passed because
Yeah, there were. Yeah,
but in it, especially so I'm like, this whole thing is ridiculous.
Alright, I got you.
Yeah, I didn't say it.
Well, I was gonna vote. I'm gonna vote. I know, he was just telling me.
My son was doing lessons. My wife came in the cover.
He said it's cool up here.
Yeah.
You know what I don't understand is the Sunday rule. That's weird.
What son? Yeah.
That you can't go unless you have a membership.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't have a membership and I would ordinarily go on Saturday or Sunday and I can't.
Stuff locally and all the fun stuff.
He's hard to keep up.
I did like two bananas.
Because we have to remember to mute our microphones.
Because let me tell you, I don't think he's coming, so.
All right.
So I just.
Good evening. I'd like to call the July 10 meeting of the Milltown Planning Board to order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided as required under Chapter 231, PL 75, specifying the time, date, location, and to the extent known, the agenda by posting a copy of the notice in the municipal building, municipal website, providing a copy to the official newspapers of the borough, and by filing a copy in the office of the borough clerk in accordance with the certification by the clerk, which will be entered in the minutes. The board's general policy is to end the presentation of testimony on applications and board discussions by 9:30 p.m. and to conclude all board business by 10 p.m. When necessary, the chair may permit a reasonable extension of those time limits. And for all who are here, applicant, audience, board, experts, please make sure you speak into the mic. Okay, so let's have a salute to the flag. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, we will have our board secretary issue the oath of office for Henry Mertens.
Repeat after me. I, Henry Mertens,
I, Henry Mertens,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully,
that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all the duties of the office of Planning Board Member
all the duties of the office of Planning Board Member
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
and that I will support the Constitution
and that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and to the governments established
and to the governments established
in the United States
in the United States
and in this state
and in this state
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Carasso.
Here.
Mr. Cook. Here. Chair LeBlanc. Mr. Mertens.
Here.
Mayor Murray. Mr. Reba. Mr. Revelinsky. Mr. Ruth.
Here.
Vice Chair Shakarian.
Here.
Ms. Payne. Here. Mr. Darren Murray.
Here.
Mr. McNamara.
Here.
Board Attorney Michael Collins.
Here.
Board Engineer Michael McClellan.
Here.
Board Planner John Barry.
Here.
Board Secretary Monica Orlando here.
Okay, Board, we have 2 Borough Council ordinances for discussion under new business. The job of the Board is to review the ordinances and ensure they comply with the borough's master plan. These ordinances were distributed to all board members and professionals for review. Both ordinances are DEP mandated as part of the stormwater management. And I'll turn the meeting over to our Board Planner, John Barry, to discuss. John?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you like to go one at a time? Do you want to talk about them together?
Yes. One at a time.
Sure. So the first item is related to privately owned salt storage facilities. And as you indicated, this is essentially a model ordinance that's been prepared by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Municipalities throughout the state are obligated to adopt this ordinance into their local codes. And it sets forth requirements for the secure storage of road salt, essentially used for wintertime de-icing and so forth. And with for the purpose of controlling runoff and making sure that the salt doesn't enter the hydrological system. As far as consistency with the master plan goes, the master plan is silent on this issue. This is a recent development, but it's certainly not inconsistent in any way with the master plan and advances a variety of the environmental goals that the borough has set forth over the years. So, so this is fairly boilerplate. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions, and do what I can to answer them.
I have a question. I don't know if this would be more fit for Mr. Barry or not. But how does this play into the New Jersey Turnpike's property and their salt storage facilities? Is this applicable to them as well?
So this applies to privately owned salt storage facilities within the borough. So if a landscaping company were keeping material on their property, or an individual had a storage container on their own private property, it would apply. But as far as the turnpike goes, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
John, this was mentioned that this came from the state, right? State DEP?
Yes.
So this ordinance did not come to Milltown because there was a need for Milltown. Like, I'm thinking that there may not be many instances where we have issues of salt running into our stormwater, so that's not why this came up.
Correct. Yeah, this is something that's being adopted statewide. I've looked at this in any number of towns that I work for. It's probably been 8th or 10th time I've had a planning board take a look at this over the last couple months. So it's across the board, all municipalities. This isn't any kind of Milltown specific. There wasn't any kind of incident. There, no reason why Milltown's being targeted with this. This is being applied to all towns.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? What I'd like to do is consider this individually and then go on to the next ordinance. So do I hear a motion to approve this ordinance? Motion. And second? Second.
Well,
Mr. Vice Chairman, just to clarify, the governing body will ultimately be approving it, but I think the action is really to refer it back to the
Refer
governing body
back.
without any comments.
Okay.
Question though too, that could also go into the companies that do have this, like for example, like Home Depot. Will they
Darren,
have
can I
any
just
copy
have
of
you
this as
talk
well,
more
too?
into the microphone so everybody can hear you? Pull it closer.
The parties that are affected by this, for example, Home Depot, they'll be getting a copy of this as well too, so they are aware that, hey, you have to do this by X amount of days.
Well, from a legal standpoint, the borough will comply with the notice requirements of a formally adopted ordinance. It'll be advertised in the newspaper. I would imagine the larger retailers are well aware of this because they're being impacted statewide on it. If there were a smaller operator, they may not be, but a Home Depot, I think, certainly would be.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table authorizing the board secretary to send a memo to the borough confirming that the planning board finds this ordinance consistent with the borough master plan. May I have a roll?
We could just do an all in favor for that.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Tree ordinance.
Okay. The next item is ordinance 24-1544 that's related to tree removal and replacement. This is, again, a DEP statewide ordinance, model ordinance that's coming down to the various municipalities. It's, the borough has had a similar set of regulations on the books for a number of years now, and this is modifying slightly. It's very similar to what's already on the books, but it's relocating the section of the code a little bit and placing it within the land development regulations, so it becomes a zoning requirement and is very specifically under the purview of the planning board, as it has been in practice in the past. But what it deals with is anytime there's going to be certain tree removal, trees over a certain diameter at breast height, there's an application to remove the trees for a tree removal permit, and then a requirement to replace the trees if the tree being removed is a healthy tree. There's tree replacement requirements based on the size of the tree that's being removed. So larger trees have replacement requirement of several trees. Small tree may be just one-for-one replacement. And then there's a replacement fee that would be paid to a common tree fund if the replacement trees can't be accommodated on the property that they're being removed from. So this is really similar to what we've had in the borough already. It's just modifying things a little bit to be consistent with the state's model language. But in practice, I don't think there'll be much change in how the borough has treated tree removal and replacement in the past. So from that perspective, it remains consistent with the current ordinance and the borough's master plan.
Comments?
I have a few comments about this. So I guess this ordinance, the way it came about, I understand it, and I found out about this by looking into it myself on the DEP website, is that this is essentially an example ordinance that was mildly tweaked, but apparently there are other methods to go about being in compliance with the DEP's regulation. Specifically, having the question be asked whether or not our current laws on trees would be, or maybe only need to be modified as opposed to wholeheartedly replacing the existing ordinance. So that was a little concerning. And the other thing is that the way the law is currently written, or how the ordinance is written, as I read it, it seems though you could have an exemption if a licensed arborist or tree expert gives proof of a tree is damaging a structure. A structure is defined to include sidewalks, so in theory, a healthy tree could be claimed to be causing damage to a structure and then be removed without any replacement trees replaced. A structure in this language is defined to include sidewalks. However, I can't find any New Jersey law that regards structures as being specifically, I only have found laws that regard structures as being buildings and explicitly does not include sidewalks. And even the Borough Code, section 15-8.2, defines a structure as being a building. It doesn't define it as a sidewalk. So I'm a little alarmed that, you know, in essence, there may be workarounds in the current language. So that's my comment. It's not really much of a question.
So, I mean, certainly a reasonable comment and something that would be appropriate to forward to the mayor and council for their consideration. You know, the board's acting in an advisory capacity. I think it's fair to raise those kinds of concerns. There are opportunities to modify the model ordinance if the borough sees fit, so that may be an area that's worth a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just want to clarify what Randy just said. So he's saying, could a healthy tree would not be replaced because it's damaging a sidewalk, right? Specifically a sidewalk. So that would be the issue that he has with it, is that we're not replacing that tree just because it's hitting a sidewalk, right? Am I- Yeah, we're looking at what the definition of structure is what we should be.
Correct. So you're referring to the definition of a hazard tree on page 2 of our handout here? Is that what you're looking at, Randy?
That's part of it, yes. Definition of a hazard tree as well as how we define a structure.
Where's the definition of structure that you're looking at?
Oh, so, well, it's in hazard tree section D, so it says,
Right, that's what I
Yeah,
was
okay.
asking about.
Gotcha.
Okay, thanks. Just so I make sure we're looking at the same thing.
Any other comments?
Would this also include curbs as well too, whereas the roots, as the roots are cutting the curbs or breaking the curbs as well too, also affecting their access way for ADA laws and things of that nature, or just in general, compromising the structure of, you know, everything, any general curb.
So, Mr. Murray, your question is, would curbs be counted as part of the sidewalk, essentially? I would assume so. You know, we don't have specific guidance on that. You know, sidewalks are called out, curbs aren't, but I would consider them generally part of the same structure if we're defining it that way, but maybe the borough wants to redefine that.
Gotcha, you never assume anything. The reason why I say this is because often that comes hand in hand with the sidewalk and the curb, where a large tree will break apart that and break up the curb as well two together, and then it becomes a nuisance because it becomes a tripping hazard or a biking hazard, or walking hazard, or whatever hazard.
No, I agree. I think perhaps you and Mr. Ruth are looking at this differently, so I'm not sure what the board's pleasure is.
Well, we just have to say whether or not it is consistent with the master plan. I mean, we can send comments, but at the end of the day, all the planning board really says is whether or not it's consistent.
And if the planning board wants to make comments, but we have two members making comments that are contradicting each other, so I don't want to assume whose comment we're going to go with.
I would also like to comment and maybe ask a clarifying question as well.
Sure.
So I heard you say that this modifies the current ordinance, right? Could you be a little more specific, like, to provide some examples of what those modifications are?
I'm going to have to get the current ordinance out. You'll have to give me a few minutes.
And then the part about the fees, is that a fee to residents?
It's a fee to whomever is removing the tree. So if you're having a tree removed from your property, I would assume that that fee would be paid by the person contracting to have the tree removed.
So we're talking about trees on properties that are in the border part, from like between the sidewalk and the street?
No, we're talking about any tree.
Any tree at all on our property?
You want to cut down all the trees in your backyard. There's a requirement to replace them or pay in lieu of replacing them, and the requirement's based on how big those trees are when you cut them down.
Okay, so then when a resident would make an application to the borough, and then someone comes out and assesses the status of the state of the tree or the size of the tree, and then is there then conversation about how that tree is replaced?
So the ordinance has an application process, so anybody who wants to remove a tree, either a street tree with a diameter of 2.5 inches or greater, and those are the trees you're talking about in the planting strip along the right-of-way, or a non-street tree with a diameter of 6 inches or greater. You have to submit a tree permit that the zoning officer reviews. Someone will come out, take a look at the tree, measure the tree, determine if it's a hazard tree, which is defined as in the ordinance here, and then based on the size of the tree and whether it's a hazard or not, there's a formula on the following page of the ordinance that deals with how many replacement trees might be required. So if your tree is between 13 and 23 inches in diameter, you have to replant 2 trees. If it's greater than 23 inches, you have to replant 3 trees, and so on.
I would like to clarify something, and that is, part of the problem that I have is the exemption. The last line, G, is that hazard trees may be removed with no fee or replacement requirement. So that's what I take issue with, is that it seems like there's a backdoor potentially to, depending on how we specifically define those hazard trees.
Right, and that's the definition of hazard tree. You know, a tree that is dead and is in imminent danger of falling on your house, your car, your neighbor's house. I think the intent is to encourage the removal of that tree rather than force somebody to pay extra on top of having a tree crew come out to remove it. But I understand you can game any system, and there are always going to be loopholes. But I think the ordinance is trying to strike that balance between encouraging the removal of hazard trees that maybe, you know, somebody might be otherwise inclined to leave up and let it fall on its own.
My concern is healthy trees that could be damaging, raising a sidewalk by a half of an inch, and you know that's damage, might create a tripping hazard, but I don't think that would be justification to have full-on removal and no replacement.
I would advise you to make the recommendations in as great a detail to the council as possible, because ultimately they're the keeper of this ordinance.
Gotcha.
Is part G, the hazardous trees, is that not determined by the licensed tree expert? On the second page?
Oh, yeah, it does say proper justification shall consist of written statements and/or photographs from a licensed tree expert or tree arborist.
So there's, for lack of a better term, there's an expert that's saying that it would be hazardous based upon the statute.
Yes, but, you know, Mr. Ruth's loopholes, I'm sure that if you're paying somebody to come remove a tree, you know, they may or may not agree that it's a hazard.
Now, is the zoning officer replacing the shade tree commission we used to have to do this?
Is the zoning officer replacing the Shade Tree Commission? I'm sorry.
Yes. We used to have a shade tree commission that would come out and assess these issues upon that. And is the zoning officer a licensed arborist that does this? Or is the zoning officer someone that's got an outside, or it's just a catch-all?
The application is made to the zoning officer. The justification for removal of trees is prepared by a licensed professional and brought to the zoning officer.
Professional what, arborist?
Yes.
And an officer at the same time?
No, they are not the same person necessarily.
Okay.
A licensed tree expert shall mean an individual who is licensed to provide tree expert services pursuant to NJSA 45:15C-11. I'm not sure what that license is exactly, but we can look it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just need just a little bit more clarification. So, as a homeowner, if I have, for example, a diseased tree on my property, it's infected. So, I no longer can call Raritan Valley Tree Service to have the dead tree removed. I have to fill out an application to the borough zoning officer to have that done?
Yes,
And that's
but that's currently the regulation.
currently the practice.
You're supposed to have a tree permit to remove a tree
Yeah,
today.
so in the past, then Raritan Valley, for example, quite a commercial for them today, they would, I'm assuming, they would be the folks that get the permit,
Yeah,
right,
often,
ordinarily, because I never recall ever having to do
sure.
that.
Oftentimes, if you hire a contractor to do work on your behalf, whether
Yeah.
it's, remodel your kitchen,
Right.
you don't usually have to go down and get the permit
Right.
yourself, usually, but someone is getting a permit if the rules are being followed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But we still have to pay an extra fee.
$20 or $10 per tree, whichever is greater.
If you have a chance to pull up the ordinance, because I'm looking and I'm just trying to gain an understanding as to the front of the house versus the back of the house. I don't see, we were talking about it being in the backyard versus the shade tree or the township. I don't see anything regarding the back in the current.
Sorry, you're talking about a street tree versus another tree on a piece of property?
Yes.
That's in
I don't
the,
see
in
the
the,
distinction in our current.
I don't believe there is. That's in the new ordinance. There's a distinction. They differentiate the diameter of the trees. Mr. Barry?
And if the tree has to be removed for municipal purposes, let's say the tree decides it's either intruding on a sewer line or intruding on a lamppost, who would incur the fee? Would the municipality incur the fee, or would the homeowner or the property that it's on be tied to that fee?
The municipality is coming and removing the tree?
Yes.
I don't think the municipality would apply for a permit to itself. I think they would remove the tree if it was a hazard.
But let's say if it's on someone's property, let's say it's a tree and it's spreading into a city sewer or water line, or it's going across a person's property, the tree would be there, would that person still be liable, that property owner be liable for that removal of the tree, even though the municipality is deciding the tree needs to be removed, not the homeowner?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not my ordinance. I did not write it.
Gotcha.
We can play gotcha games with me all night, but
Thank you, though.
Or maybe the attorney can
Those
help
are,
us.
those are more questions, I think, for the borough attorney and the borough council. And at the end of the day, I mean, there is an ordinance already on file. This is just updating it to what the DEP wants to do. There was a boilerplate. You know, the engineer took a look at the numbers and the fees and the trees. And the one change I can tell you we do have is the tree list, rather than being tied into the ordinance, is going to be on file in the clerk's office. I talked to her, she said it's okay. And then that way, if we change the trees on the list, we don't have to amend the ordinance every single time we have to change the trees.
Gotcha. Thank you so very much.
But this is on file already. People should be applying for permits.
Just to follow up on what the secretary was saying, the borough really doesn't have very much discretion. I'm looking at the DEP model ordinance on their website, and obviously they set the floor, and you can only become more stringent from that. And, you know, they've set forth this exact ordinance, and for better or for worse, and whether we find loopholes or not, that's the version that the state's given the municipalities to consider and adopt.
Gotcha. I'm always the most problematic situation because that tends to be what we encounter.
Yep, no, it's understood.
But at the end of the day, we just need to tell them, yes, it's consistent with the master plan, or no, it's not. And not all the what-ifs.
Okay. So as I understand it, the major change with this new ordinance that the DEP would like all municipalities to pass is this is now affecting private trees that are not the shade trees at the street. And if you remove a tree, you need to replace it or you need to pay a fee. Is that correct?
yes, but that's what the borough's ordinance already does.
For any shade tree?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the one concern I have is we have a 13-page shade tree ordinance. We're replacing it with a 6-page shade tree ordinance.
Right.
Our shade tree ordinance is pretty extensive. And I note that I don't know how much of a difference it's going to be in terms of the fees, but it seems as though the fee schedule for our current ordinance is more stringent than the fee schedule for the new ordinance.
The advice may be to the mayor and council to send the existing tree ordinance into DEP to petition to have it approved as adequate.
Say that again, please.
Perhaps the advice would be to the mayor and council to send the existing shade tree ordinance to the DEP and request that it be approved as an adequate alternative.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure, we've done better.
Okay, so do I have a motion
I just have one
to
question.
send a memo to the borough confirming that the planning board finds this ordinance, the shade tree ordinance, consistent with the borough master plan, with the stipulation that we feel that the current shade tree ordinance is more stringent, and we would like that sent to the DEP and compared to the boilerplate ordinance for improvement.
I just have
Does
one
that
question.
sound right?
Yeah, I have one question for Mr. Collins before
Sure.
we make a motion. According to the DEP's new regulation, is our current shade tree ordinance compliant or not?
The way DEP has it on their model ordinance, certain municipalities that have certain certifications can keep their current ordinance, and then otherwise, if you have an existing tree ordinance, you can contact the department to see if they'll approve it for satisfying these requirements. So obviously, you currently have Chapter 19, which is proposed for repeal and replacement under this ordinance. You know, the borough, and I don't know if the borough governing body has considered this or not, but there is an approval process for current ordinances if a municipality is looking to maintain those. So I think your comment that the vice chairman laid out would certainly, provide that comment to them for consideration, and they could certainly pursue that if they think that's something worthwhile.
And also, don't forget, we don't have a shade tree commission anymore, which is in that ordinance currently. So that may
That's
be
correct.
a lot of the
Yeah.
13 or whatever pages that are now not gonna be there anymore, is all the shade tree commission guidelines.
It would have to be modified.
Yeah, at the very least, that would have to come out of the old one.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to find out if our current ordinance is non-compliant, there's no sense in, if the current ordinance doesn't meet the criteria that the DEP set forward for the new ordinance, for the new model, it doesn't make sense for us to forward a recommendation to apply for essentially a variance using our own non-compliant ordinance as opposed to their model ordinance. So that's, I guess, the clarification that I'm trying to get.
I think that's right. I mean, to the point that if your current Chapter 19 references a commission that's not functioning or is not in operation or, for whatever reason is not meeting the DEP standards, it's very well possible that what you currently have on the books in Chapter 19 doesn't meet the standard. I'm sure that's something that your borough engineer could look at more closely in consultation with the borough attorney. I really think we're hard pressed to answer those questions here at the planning board side, but we could certainly provide that feedback for them to consider if they haven't already.
Chair, I have a question, or Steve
Yes.
as well. So from what I'm reading from the DEP is that the only guidelines the ordinance must follow is that there is some type of removal and replacement element, and that it's applicable to all areas of the community, including private properties. And I feel that this ordinance, as it's written, is not necessarily compliant with the spirit of the master plan because it's somewhat inadequate. While albeit meeting the bare minimum offered by the DEP, but that our current ordinance is a little bit more strict and offers more protection for trees. And I think that maybe the recommendation should be that the Borough Council look at potentially updating the current ordinance.
Okay. So, do I have a motion authorizing the board secretary to send a memo to the borough council confirming that the planning board finds the ordinance consistent with the borough master plan, yet
Recommends.
ask the council to compare the Chapter 19 ordinance with the new ordinance and see whether that old ordinance can be improved rather than accept the new ordinance. How does that sound?
That's acceptable to me from a legal standpoint.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion?
Henry?
Second?
Aaron?
All in favor?
Before we vote, Mr. Collins, did you say that was unacceptable? I just want to make sure I heard.
Yeah, I don't see any legal issue. You certainly have the statutory right to provide comments, and I think it adequately conveys the sentiment of the board here. Certainly.
All right. Did we get an all in favor? I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do any members have any other new business to bring before the board? If not, I'll close new business. Do any member have old business to bring before the board? If not, I'll close old business. Okay, now we have an application hearing for Christopher Street. Block 76, lots 19 to 23. The subject tract is known as lots 19 through 23 in Block 76. And I will ask Mr. Sachs to start the application.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, board professionals, members of the public. Lawrence Sachs on behalf of the applicant. This property is located on Christopher Street. As the chairman indicated, it's block 76, lots 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. The property is located in your R8 single-family zone. Just to give a little bit of background about this application, it originally was heard before this board last year, but was not heard to conclusion. There were a number of technical concerns that were raised by your board engineer and your board planner, which required the applicant to go back to the drawing board and supply some additional studies and make some revisions to the plan. In fact, you do have in front of you this evening revised plans dated April 29, 2024 from our engineer, which the original plans that were submitted in November of 22 were prepared by a different engineer. So, and Mr. Benedetto, who's going to be testifying tonight, was testifying as to those old plans, but he has now prepared revised plans. Secondly, there was a request that we provide some soil logs and some other hydrologic studies to this property, and that was done in March of 2024, and you have that report as well. And finally, there was a request to look into the water and sewer demand for this particular piece of property, which is proposed to be the construction of a single-family house, and we provided that report, and that's dated April 19th of 2024. So essentially, we're starting this application anew. I have one witness who is my engineer and planner, and just so the board is familiar with this site, it fronts on Christopher Street, which is a paper street. There's a proposal with this particular application to improve that street, but it is a paper street presently. The proposal is to construct a 4-bedroom, single-family house, 2-car garage with the basement. And we do require some variance and waiver relief. We'll get into that a little bit later, but one of the variances that we require or waivers that we require is pursuant to the Municipal Land Use Law, Section 35, where it's a requirement to have an improved street for a lot. Now, this is a technical variance because our proposal is to improve Christopher Street. So if the board acts favorably on this, we will be improving Christopher Street, and that variance will disappear. The second one is a steep slope requirement, and our engineer will get into that. So, Mr. Chairman, without further ado, if I can have my engineer sworn in, I'll qualify him and he'll go over the plans.
Before we do so, Mr. Vice Chairman and Mr. Sachs, if I could just interject, I think Mr. Sachs eloquently addressed the things that I wanted to address, but if I could just kind of parse them out for purposes of the record. The first thing is it's been determined, and I just want to confirm the applicant's counsel agrees that this matter is going to be proceeding as the planning board sitting as a zoning board of adjustment. The reason being the subject property is proposed to be a single-family dwelling, which is site plan exempt. So therefore, there is no site plan application that would trigger the jurisdiction of the planning board. And so essentially, this board is being asked to provide bulk C variance relief to a single-family dwelling. And so the mayor is not present tonight or the council member, but otherwise they would not be participating. And I just want to make that clear for the record in case that comes up at a future meeting, that this is a zoning board application. Is there agreement with that, Mr. Sachs?
Yes, and as a joint board, obviously, you sit as both planning board and zoning board. I have no objection to that. I discussed it with your council earlier today. So yes, we'll be seeking bulk variance relief. We're not seeking a use variance, which would require a supermajority. This is a permitted use in the zone, but it does require some bulk variance relief, and we'll provide the proofs as to that.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Benedetto, if you can come on up and maybe bring that easel up here as well.
It broke right before we
It
started.
broke, okay, all right. Okay.
And one other thing I do want to clarify that Mr. Sachs also referenced, I know that this subject property has been part of an active application, and there was a hearing that was held during 2023. Both parties have stipulated that hearing will not be evidentiary, and that, as Mr. Sachs referenced, we are not starting essentially anew, but actually anew. So there were some references to past requests for due diligence. While those may be helpful and informative to the applicant here, and they're probably wise to heed those requests, we're starting with a blank slate. So I want both sides to just consent to that on the record, and certainly nothing's in evidence right now, and we're not going to make any reference to that past application.
Absolutely. Nothing is in evidence. We're starting anew.
Very good. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
Can I just have the engineer's name and before
Yes,
you do the oath?
Cross my fingers, thanks. Robert Benedetto?
Robert?
Yes.
Spell your last name for the record, sir.
Benedetto.
That's it. I had a feeling it was spelled that way. Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Benedetto, if you can give the board the benefit of your education and professional qualifications.
Sure. I have a bachelor's in environmental engineering from the University of Delaware. I'm a practicing civil engineer for over 10 years, licensed for 5 of them. My license is in good standing in all states I'm licensed in, obviously in New Jersey, and I have appeared before this board.
And I believe he was qualified in 2023.
Yes, okay. So I believe that we can accept you as an expert.
Awesome.
All right, thank you. All right, so, Mr. Benedetto, why don't you give us a brief description of the property, where it's located, conditions, and then obviously some revisions that were made to this particular plan.
So the property is located at the back end of Henry Street on the west side. Christopher Street is currently 50-foot wide paper street, so it's only on the tax map. It's a whole wooded area right in the middle of a residential area. As Mr. Sachs said, the zoning is R8 for single-family residential. It's currently block 76, lots 19 through 23. Each of those lots is 25-foot wide. I believe all 5 lots are to be combined by deed, not as part of this application. And the project is essentially a single-family home, which will require partial construction about 160 feet of Christopher Street to get to the driveway, and a little bit at the north end as well for vehicle maneuverability. So if I may go to the site plan. A little bit.
Mr. Benedetto, why don't you, which sheet is it?
This is drawing 6, the site plan. Return for a second. So the house is about 2,500 square foot footprint. Single-family home with a 2-car garage. As I mentioned before, there's currently no street access, so you could see improvements to Christopher Street, which include a sidewalk traversing the entire area, a bit of a hammerhead layout for emergency vehicles to be able to maneuver. It'll have a 30-foot curb-to-curb width. Part of the application is proposing to remove 39 trees, to which the client will elect to pay into the tree fund. Could look into potentially planting more back where feasible. The house itself, the structure is
As of right, from a setback perspective, there are no setback variances. Proposing a simple concrete walkway from the driveway to the front. Typical landscaping and lawn around the house. The driveway itself is about 20 foot wide by about 35 feet long. As part of the grading for the site to make the roadway compliant with both NJDOT standards and with Milltown ordinance standards, we have some retaining walls around the perimeter of the sidewalk within the right-of-way. Again, just given the slope requirements for the roadway, for the sidewalk, to make everything comply, it was necessary. Flip to the next page for the grading design. Sheet 7. So currently the topography slopes very heavily from high to low, from east to west. Anybody who stood at the end of Henry Street can see that. So we are proposing a maximum slope of 3 to 1 everywhere, which is the maximum slope required for stability by the New Jersey standards for soil erosion and sediment control. The driveway itself will be a little steep, or will be 7.5%. So steep driveway, but just enough to get cars parked there. We're proposing a swale in the rear to get water out from hitting the house. The curb reveal along Christopher Street is between 4 and 6 inches. Again, just to make the grading work as best as we can. And we're proposing a small swale at the southern end to get the water kind of flowing in the correct direction as well. Go to the next page here, sheet 8. From a stormwater perspective, I know one of the concerns was a soil test. The testing actually yields good infiltration results, a passing result. As such, in the southeast corner of the property, we have an infiltration system consisting of 2 storm tech chambers. For those who aren't as versed, you've driven past the construction site, it's the big yellow domes. The dry well system, the infiltration system has been sized for the roof runoff, as is required by the ordinance. From a utility perspective, obviously we got to connect to what we can over in Henry Street, so we're running gravity sewer lateral out to a new manhole in the street. From there, it'll be the municipal sewer, following municipal requirements, ultimately tying into the manhole at the beginning of Henry Street. Water will also tie into the water main at the beginning of Henry Street. It will not have to be looped, as we only have 1 unit per RSIS standards. And then electrical is going to be coordinated with the provider in the area. It'll likely tie into the utility pole on Henry Street as well. Gas, same idea, tie into the main at Henry Street. As Mr. Sachs mentioned, there's 2 variances being sought. The first is building a lot on an unimproved street. None exists. Part of the street, or part of the project, is improving the street, which would eliminate that variance. The other is for the steep slopes disturbance. We are proposing about 4,000 square feet in excess of 25%. We're seeking the variance because my client has the right to build upon his property. Obviously, in order to do so, some steep slopes are going to have to be disturbed. I understand there have been concerns about making the house smaller to minimize the steep slopes disturbance, moving it around. We kind of evaluated all options, and ultimately with the requirements for the roadway, the sidewalk, all that for the slopes you have to meet, in order to get any kind of feasible property or feasible building on this property, you're going to need to disturb steep slopes, obviously. The size of that house, the size of the structure, really doesn't affect the amount of steep slopes disturbance, in that even if you have a tiny little house, You're still going to have to meet your grades at either side. You're still going to have to meet your roadway grades. And there's really no way to minimize the amount of steep slopes disturbance based on the size of the house.
Yeah, I think that the slope, the last time that this application came in front of us, the slope, I think, was the tipping point for us, or the one factor that certainly was the variance that wasn't digestible for the board. A lot of the slope, you said excess of 25%. I think, I know where this application is standing on its own. Excess of 25 means more than 25, up to 29, I think, may have been mentioned in the past. So I think that that's the most difficult thing to get over for this application is that we have that steep slope ordinance to not construct on steep slopes, and we discussed with our planning board the negatives of constructing on steep slopes, and that's why we do have an ordinance to not construct on the steep slopes. So that's my major concern with this application, is the steep slopes.
Yep. Mr. Carrasco, I appreciate the comment, thank you. And I do recall that was one of the issues that was brought last time. Quite frankly, it's going to be difficult we could build a smaller house, it's really not going to eliminate the steep slope. The only way that it's possible to eliminate some of that disturbance is to reconfigure perhaps the, Christopher Street, or at least how we're going to configure Christopher Street. That's something we may have to have discussion with your board engineer about. Believe me, we would love to eliminate it, but let me ask you this question, Mr. Benedetto. In terms of the grading, what is the ratio of grading, and are we satisfying any concerns with respect to grading?
Yeah, we're using the maximum allowable slope in all pervious areas, any future grassed areas, wherever we possibly can, to make up for the difference in grade that's going to result from the project. And any size structure you put there, and anywhere you put it on this property, you're going to end up disturbing about the same amount of steep slopes. Even if you shrink the house all the way up to this tiny little box in the north end, in order to make your driveway work, in order to make your roadway work, you still have to do all this exterior grading, disturbing the steep slopes, to make it a feasible construction.
Also, you compensate for the trees you're ripping out as well, too. The reason that steep slope exists is because your trees, the roots, have held that all together. Rip out the trees, what's going to pull it all together? Blocks, concrete, what are you're trying to replace?
Well, again, that's why we'd be proposing the slopes at a maximum allowable per the soil erosion sediment control standards.
40 trees is a lot of trees, and we love our trees in Milltown, so.
Yes, I understand. But, my client is electing to pay the tree fund, and we're happy to also try to look at places where we could put trees back, for sure, and especially minimize the payment. If you're going to pay into the fund, you want to see it on your property itself.
I get that, but basically he's tearing up a whole area that you can't just kind of knit back together. So between runoff, between structure, it just kind of seems scary. You're going to rip out, you're want to dig into an area that's never been dug into before. I think there's a reason why that wasn't done. And the reason why this is a paper street, not an active street, maybe because it wasn't a good idea to build in there in the first place.
Yeah, Mr. Murray, I can't answer that question. I don't know what the legislative intent was back when this was declared a paper street.
Gotcha, I understand.
Yeah. Certainly, and listen, some of us are old enough to remember, and I'm going to make an analogy to what you could build here. I always use photomat. That's probably what you could build on this property, would be a photomat without disturbing anything.
And why build?
And I see Mr. McClellan shaking his hand, so he knows what I'm talking about. Some members of the public may understand that as well.
Yeah.
All right, we understand your concerns, so if I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if, Mr. Benedetto, you have anything else to add at this point in terms of what's proposed here?
No.
Okay. If you want, Mr. Chairman, I do have the report from CME and from Mr. Barry. If you want, I'll go through it real quickly. We can comment on it, because I think we can agree upon most of it. We're going to get to some highlights, which I'm sure we're not going to agree upon. All right, but if you don't mind, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold on, before anybody else talks, I just need everybody to make sure they're talking into the microphone, because those members who aren't here are going to need to listen to a recording, so we have to make sure that everything is captured. So nice and loud, big voices in the microphone, please. Thank you.
Okay, all right, so let me,
I just wanted to.
oh, I'm sorry,
Real
sir.
quick, I just wanted to make sure that I understood I do understand the photo map reference, but is the main disruption of the steep slope here in building the street versus the home? Is that what I'm understanding?
It's both. It's everything.
I have a question. I have one question for you regarding your water service. Say that you're running 6-inch ductile from Henry Street up to the dead end T, and then your tap, and then you have one hydrant coming off. Looks like it might be 25 feet up, upstream of the tap. Has there been any thought to maintaining the AWWA and DEP water quality standards of 0.2 parts per million at the curb stop? Because if that is a dead end there, and there's no way to flush water through what's gonna be maybe 120, 150, between 120 and 140 feet of 6-inch ductile, you're gonna have significant increased chlorine demand in there. And I don't know if you will be able to maintain, I don't know if the utility will be able to maintain, because this is eventually gonna go over to the utility, if the utility will be able to maintain the proper water quality standards without having a flush point downstream of the tap for the service going into the property.
One of the engineer's comments that we'll get to is actually to relocate the hydrant closer to the corner. So we're happy to comply with that for sure. And if it's a concern, we'll absolutely look into what you're asking and make sure we have a flush point downstream of the tap.
And Henry, there's one high point that needs to be addressed on the water line profile, and there'll be a flush hydrant no matter what at the end. So
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure, because it's not pictured, and I wanted to make sure it was gonna be out there.
No, it's, the water line is still, we have conditions, if you do decide to approve this application, that they will be submitted revised plans.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if you want, I'll go over the CME
Yes,
report,
please.
which is dated June 28th of 2024. I'll turn to page 2, which is preliminary and final site plan issues. Mr. Benedetto, I'm looking at paragraph 1. We can comply with that?
Whoa.
Which page are we on, Mr. Saxon?
I'm on page 2. Okay, anyway, I'm on page 2, paragraph 1. I'm assuming we'll comply with that. That's just a technical request. Paragraph 2 deals with providing cross-sections, centerline profiles, and grades of all proposed streets. You can provide that?
Yes.
Number 3 is a copy of any covenants, deed restrictions, or exceptions. Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any. If the board acts favorably on this, we'll provide a title search, which will confirm that. So
Okay.
that's not an issue. Paragraph 4 was a request for waiver of an environmental impact statement, which was requested. All right, site plan issues. Paragraph 1, the applicant should discuss the proposed architecture. I believe you have some plans from the architect, from 3D Architecture. It's 4 bedrooms that are proposed. It's a 2-car garage. The parking will satisfy the RSIS. And I think you may even have an elevation in there. It's just your typical Central Jersey single-family home. Just to save some time, paragraph 2 will comply with. Paragraph 3 is just a comment that we do satisfy the RSIS with respect to parking. Paragraph 4 deals with a request to consolidate the lots. Of course, we'll do that. So we'll go from the 5 lots to the 1 lot. Paragraph 5, we will comply with. Paragraph 6, we will comply with. Paragraph 7 deals with street lighting, we'll provide that. All right, paragraph 8 deals with the steep slopes. So I think our position with respect to that is based upon the topography of this lot, it really is going to be difficult for us to disturb any less soil and any steep slopes. You know, certainly I have a lot of respect for Mr. McClellan's opinion on this, and if he thinks there's some way that we can minimize it, I'm certainly willing and to listen to any comments he might have.
tough site to grade, for sure. The one way that this has been done in Milltown for years is that retaining walls have been used along the back property line, and then that reduces the grade in the front of the property. So that doesn't necessarily resolve your ordinance requirement, which requires no disturbance of the steep slope. But that'd be one way to address and basically calm the slope down. So it'd be along the back wall, there'd be a retaining wall. You can't support retaining walls within the right-of-way, which, is standard. The ultimate maintenance of retaining walls over the years, you don't want it as the borough. So I think if there's going to be retaining walls, it should be on the property proposed by the applicant. But that may be one way to try and, basically cut the slope down, maintain the slopes along the back of the property, and then cut the grade down where the house is, ultimately providing a change in the slope only on the resident's property. The concern at Lincoln is because we have these problems in town for years because it's been vegetated. You have to really work on trying to control the drainage. It's not just runoff from one house. You've got all this area that's being cleared where the trees were before. There's going to be significant runoff. So there'll have to be some attention given to how you control that. But that'd be one way of trying to go through and alleviate the issue. It doesn't solve, I think you're still going to need a variance based upon my understanding. I'll defer to the attorney, because the ordinance specifically states you can't disturb them, but that may be one way. If I was to attack it, that's what I would do.
As far as, you mentioned retaining walls in the right-of-way.
Can I just have you talking to the microphone, please? Sorry.
With regards to the retaining walls in the right-of-way, in order to make a properly crowned roadway on Christopher Street, given how quickly the grade rises up in existing conditions, what would your recommendation be? Since, directly across from Henry Street, my client doesn't own those properties, in order to wall it off like you're suggesting.
It's a difficult thing to support the construction of a retaining wall inside the right-of-way. Even if you agreed to improve it and maintain it for the next 50 years, I mean, I've seen too many things go awry with that. So I think we got to work around that somehow.
Yeah, the offer I was going to make, Mr. McClellan, and to the board, we understand there's a retaining wall in the right-of-way. The right-of-way is there for any future road widening. I would doubt that Christopher Street is going to be widened after we give a right-of-way dedication. So it's there, but I don't think that right-of-way is ever going to be utilized. Of course, if in fact utility lines are in the right-of-way and the municipality ever needs to access those utility lines within that right-of-way, and the retaining wall acts as an impediment, certainly any reconstruction of that retaining wall would be at our cost and expense and not at the municipalities. That's really the only consideration I can get to on, give on that particular issue, which I'll address in a minute. But I appreciate Mr. McClellan's comments, at least as to the steep slopes, and certainly maybe we can revisit that. As I said, this is somewhat revised plan, but maybe it needs to be revised a little bit more. That's a thought I'm thinking. All right, let me just quickly go through some of these other comments. Let's see, number 9, applicant's engineer should review the need for the clearing and regrading within the, well, all right, that's the right-of-way issue, which we just discussed, as is paragraph 10, which deals with the retaining wall within the borough right-of-way. Number 11, will we comply with? Number 12, 13, 14, 15 deals with tree removal and whether we intend to provide replacement trees or contribute to the tree escrow fund. Having sat through the discussion prior to this, we understand that obviously there's going to be a new tree ordinance. Most likely we'll be contributing to the tree fund. All right, so we can make that part of any condition. 16 we'll comply with, 17 we'll comply with, 18 we'll comply with. In terms of stormwater management, paragraph 1, there's a request that we consider modifying the grading around the dry well in order to prevent surface runoff entering same. I think we can comply with that. Thank you. Number 2, we can comply with. Number 3, we can comply with. Number 4, we can comply with. 5, we can comply with. 6, yes, we'll provide an operations and maintenance manual. By the way, for members of the public who think I'm just ripping through these, the ones that we're complying with are just all technical recommendations. So I'm just making life a little bit easier.
These are all also on the planning board website.
Yes.
I uploaded the reports.
Okay. Let's see, utility comments. we can comply with paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a request that we review the adequacy of the proposed pipe slope relative to the potential separation of solids from the flow, considering the sewer flows will be limited to one dwelling. We can comply with that?
Yes.
Okay. Number 7, we'll comply with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 17, I think you already commented on, was relocating the proposed hydrant, and I think that addresses Mr. Merton's concerns, and yes, we'll relocate that to the end of the roadway. Let's see, 18, we don't have a loop here is a loop for the water main, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and you'll comply with any requirements to demonstrate that it will operate correctly?
Yep.
All right. Number 19, we'll comply with, and number 20, we'll comply with. In terms of traffic comments, this is now on page 7. Testimony should be provided regarding emergency vehicle, delivery vehicle, and refuse vehicle circulation. Have you provided some turning templates for the review of the of
Yes.
CME?
It's drawing, I believe drawing 11. I'm just going to double check that. Nope. Drawing 13 has a truck turning template for a fire truck.
All right. I know Mr. McClellan and I spoke before the meeting. He's got a concern about refuse vehicle circulation.
Solid waste vehicles and recycling, they're required to either pull it or back into the site to get, we've got some major concerns. The borough has had a long-standing requirement for turnarounds at the end of dead ends like that, and RSAS also speaks to it. So I think that you may want to review that in terms of the RSS requirements and see what can be done to resolve it. There's been long-standing requirements to construct cul-de-sacs in the borough. I don't know what the board's tenor on this these days is, but the problem we have concerns are is approving a brand-new application where we contemplate that the garbage truck has to back up either into the street or out of the street. Visibility for a child and a bicycle and that type of vehicle is zero, and I just can't support it. That's one problem.
Okay, we'll look into that, Mike. Let's see. Going on traffic comments, number 2 we'll comply with, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do we need a site triangle easement here?
No.
Okay. Construction details, we'll comply with paragraphs 1 and 2. The as-built plans, those are just general comments, but certainly we'll comply with any of the recommendations with respect to that, which deal with storm system, roadway systems, buildings, water distribution, and sanitary sewer. And in terms of any outside agency approvals, if you can just briefly comment on that, do we require any NJDEP approval on this?
No.
All right. What about Middlesex County Planning Board?
Yes, we'll see that.
You'll seek that. Freehold soil, of
Yes.
course. Milltown Borough Police Department.
Yes.
I'm not sure we received any comment from them, but certainly if they've got any concerns, which I would doubt, we'll certainly address it. Fire Department, again, same thing if they have any concerns, but I think we've demonstrated that at least emergency vehicles can circulate, and we will relocate that hydrant. And also if the borough water, sewer, and electric utilities have any comment. All right, so that's Mr. McClellan's report. Before we get to Mr. Barry's report, let's just real briefly touch on some of the variance testimony. So essentially, the only variance we really need is for the steep slope. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And if you can just briefly comment on, the criteria that we need to satisfy, understanding that this is a bulk variance, not a use variance. So it's either under a C1, which is a hardship, or a C2. So let me ask you this, Mr. Benedetto. Certainly, this probably fits within the realm of being a C1.
Yes.
It's obviously a tight site. It's got some severe topography, but certainly it's a permitted use within the zone. Based upon your, the revised plans that you've provided, and particularly dealing with trying to minimize as much disturbance as possible, do you believe that we can satisfy the criteria to sustain a C1 bulk variance?
Yes.
All right. And in terms of the C2, which is a flexible C2 variance, we have to show whether or not the benefits outweigh any detriments to the community. Can you opine on whether there's any issues with any detriments to the surrounding area versus the benefits of developing a vacant lot at this particular point in time?
In my opinion, no, because sorry, microphone.
Thank you.
We're planning on paying into the Borough Tree Fund and potentially planting more on site. The site will be stabilized and, from a soil erosion sediment control standard. And I think those would kind of be the main two.
All right, let's go over Mr. Barry's report. If he's got any other planning issues, I guess we can address them.
Before we go over Mr. Berry's report, maybe we should just ask the board whether they have any questions about the engineering report?
I have a few questions, Chairman.
Pull it closer, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I had a few questions, Chairman, specifically about the location of the retaining walls. I understand that there's one within the right-of-way, that's obvious. Were there ones adjacent to the sidewalks?
Yes.
Can you illustrate that more clearly for maybe myself and others? Because I'm not too sure if they extend beyond the property line, the property owner's property, or not.
Sure. So, presently, the walls that you're referring to are just outside of where the sidewalk is proposed. So the way this section will look, you have your roadway, you have your curb, you have a small grass strip, and then you have your sidewalk with a wall right next to it. I think in most cases, the most you're going to see up is about 2 feet. That's how it's designed currently. As Mr. McClellan said, we're going to look to figure a way to rework that to comply. But given the topography of the site, as I've mentioned, you guys are probably exhausted hearing about it, but it's just the only way to make the sidewalk compliant with the cross-slope requirements and the roadway compliant with the cross-slope requirements as well.
So just to be clear, it would be going, this retaining wall would be going everywhere there's going to be a new sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to extend, well, to adjacent properties?
Yes.
Right.
Well, in the right of way, but
Within, yeah.
parallel adjacent.
Right, and I'm just, and I don't know if this is necessarily a question for you, but would that potentially create a hardship for adjacent property owners, let's say closer to the Henry Street intersection, if they were to try to also develop?
They would have to figure out a way to make their driveway compliant with meeting the roadway requirements.
With a wall that's there, and who would own that wall?
I believe the town would own it with a maintenance agreement from my client.
Okay, and is there a reason, or can you explain a little bit more detail, specifically the end of Christopher Street, basically furthest away from the property owner's driveway, why it needs to actually go all the way around? I'm just curious.
Sure.
And do you have a detail of how that will terminate into the existing sidewalk?
So to answer your first part of that question, the grade falls off so steeply there, and we still have the roadway slope requirements to meet. I can't have a 15-foot or 15% roadway coming straight down. So in order to make sure we flatten it out, we need walls at either side to make sure we still meet the grades. How does it terminate? It'll almost terminate like any low landscaping wall, where it'll just kind of come up, and then at some point will just fade into the ground when we meet grade.
Okay. There was another question I had, but I'll let others.
Any other questions?
I have a question for you regarding the emergency vehicle access.
Sure.
Was there any thought to extending Christopher Street farther south towards East Lincoln in order to facilitate, I know you use the pumper truck here, but if you were to try to put an aerial ladder in here, you do not have the scrub to hit the front of the building much less, according to your prints,
Microphone.
bedrooms 2 and 3, you will not be able to get an aerial ladder or any sort of apparatus to the end of Christopher Street and spin it using your turnaround table. Was there any thought to extending Christopher Street farther south to make it easier for emergency response vehicles?
I think I can respond to that. I think probably even prior to our last hearing back in 2023, we had discussions with the administration at that point. They didn't want to see Christopher Street go any further than where it was. In other words, they didn't want to see it become a cut-through street down to Lincoln, which, I understand. So that's the reason why it terminates where it is.
Oh, no, yeah, I wasn't talking about having it extend all the way down to East Lincoln. I thought maybe, from your drawing, maybe the additional 2 blocks, the additional 2 lots
We don't know
south.
that property. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think. Oh,
So that way you could continue your emergency vehicle access straight, and then they'd be able to access bedrooms 2 and 3.
It would certainly make the steep slopes issue more challenging. And it would also create much more of a grading issue. Those contours fall off very quickly, so, instead of a possible 4-foot wall, you're talking about a possible 10-foot wall in the right-of-way, which is obviously a little more of an issue. So we kind of just ran it to get to the closest possible location for our driveway, understanding that it might be difficult to really extend much further.
Other questions?
Oh, I have one other question. Looking at this and I don't know if this is a requirement, I think it's just something of practical concern. Was there given any thought into snow removal? Because the way I see this, I can see a snow plow pushing it onto the owner's property, but when the borough clears the street, I am a little bit concerned that there may be the potential to block the residents' proposed driveway.
Sure. So the wall at the southern end is actually only a 6-inch reveal where the grade is lower outside of the wall. So pushing the snow out that way would actually, you could potentially just push it over a curb, for instance, into the area past that.
And you don't think a dry stacked retaining wall would be easily damaged by a truck doing that?
We could potentially look into ways to mitigate it, but we could take that into consideration.
Thank you.
So I have a question with regard to page 5 of the plan, where you show the steep slopes in a grayscale, in a shading. I don't see a key, so can you elaborate a little bit more for me about that?
It is there in the top right. You had me nervous for a second.
Okay, so the darkest is 20%?
Yes.
Okay.
And if it would be easier visually, I typically like to print my plans in black and white, just because I think it's easier when it comes to printing, but something like this is obviously a little more difficult. Visually, we're happy to add more colors to it to separate it out.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't see it. I don't know how many times I looked at this. Didn't notice it. Okay, so we see that we have the 20% grade, 20% steep slopes, to a large extent on lots 20 and 21, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also into some of those areas of Christopher Street, which you are going to improve. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You all were asking for an EIS waiver.
Yes.
I know back in December, that was another time, there was some discussion of maybe providing that EIS. as I see it, we have a natural area with kind of extreme geographical features and wildlife. It's not a redevelopment. So what would be your basis to ask for a waiver?
Typically for single-family home applications, as they are usually more simple, an EIS waiver is a reasonable request. And I think given the only real environmental concern here, there's no wetlands, there's no flood hazard area, the only environmental concern was the steep slopes, which we figured would be discussed in the variance testimony. That was the waiver justification.
Okay. Other questions?
Yes. Really crazy question, maybe this might be,
Microphone, please.
sorry. Crazy question, maybe more personal upon that, but why build there of all things? You've got 6 lots there, why not build towards, or building lot 23, 24, 25, right on top of Henry Street rather than going in? You'd minimize the trees you're removing, possibly even the slope as well too. It's easier access because you're on an established street already. It just seems like
Sure.
you've dug in for an area that needs to be dug into. I just, maybe that's a personal reason?
I can't speak to speaking on or building on lots 24 and 25 because the application's through 23. That's all my client owns. But the building is, it's pushed towards the north end, and you could see all the steep slopes disturbance based on the exhibit. A lot of it is towards the south end, and that's just because of the regrading necessary in order to make a foundation slab.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that you've got Henry Street right there, perfectly open area there. And yet then you want to go dig into a paper street right there. It just seems like, well, why not put the house on Henry Street, not worry about Christopher Street, or just deal with a small area of impact? Might be a personal choice, and I understand that, but curiosity's sake, why go that far?
Sure. I don't have an answer other than these are the lots that my client owns, and this is what he wants to develop on. I don't think he can look to develop anywhere else.
Was he told he could and did not know if he could?
I can't speak to that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a question.
Should we go on to the planner's report?
Yeah, we can briefly go over Mr. Barry's report. So again, Mr. Barry's report dated June 28, 2024. I'll skip to page 3 of 5. I know Mr. Barry has indicated the 2 variances or waivers that we require. One of them obviously is the steep slope disturbance. The other one is building lot to abut and improved street. Let me ask you this question, Mr. Benedetto. With respect to the Section 35 variance that's required regarding the improved street, and I know Mr. Barry has quoted this in his report, that variance can be issued as long as we can provide adequate access for firefighting equipment, ambulances, and other emergency vehicles necessary for the protection of health and safety that will protect any future street layout shown on the official map or on a general circulation plan element of the municipal master plan. Well, we know that we are going to, if this board acts favorably, we're going to improve that street anyway. So that sort of eliminates that. But in order to address the spirit and intent of Section 35 of the municipal land use law, is it your professional opinion that adequate access for firefighting equipment, ambulances, and other emergency vehicles necessary for the protection of health and safety will be provided?
Yes.
Okay. And turning now to page 4 of Mr. Barry's report, I think, and John, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, paragraph 2 is just a comment of the particular variance that we require for the steep slope. I believe you've given some testimony under both a C1 hardship and under a C2 flexible C that the benefits would outweigh any detriments in the granting of this variance. Again, we're constructing a single-family house really on an isolated street at this particular point in time. That paper street's going to be improved. In your opinion, is that a benefit?
Yes.
And you've indicated that we're certainly going to contribute to the tree fund, your new tree fund for any trees that are removed. And in terms of dealing with the steep slope, you're providing a grade that is consistent with the type of slope that we have there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, paragraph 4 deals with his comment as to the steep slope ordinance, which we accept. We understand we need a variance for that. Paragraph 5, he talks about he talks about the side yard setback as 18.83 feet where 10 is required. Has the applicant considered sliding the dwelling 8 feet to the north, which could potentially reduce the steep slope disturbance and tree removal? What's your response as to that?
We have considered, and again, given the topography. We have considered, and given the topography, that it would really be an insignificant change in the steep slope disturbance area.
Okay. Paragraph 6 is a request that we perhaps move the structure closer to the street to potentially reduce proposed disturbance on site. I'm going to reserve on responding to that because there may be some revisions to the plans, and maybe we'll see if we can possibly relocate this house, and maybe we'll pick up some area where we're not disturbing. I think he's made a good comment as to that. Let's see. Paragraph 7, again, Mr. Barry is requesting that we consider maybe a smaller house. I think our testimony thus far is we don't think that's really going to minimize the disturbance, but again, we'll look into that. Let's see, paragraph 8 on page 5. Yes, we understand we have to, we'll comply with whatever the tree ordinance is. Let's see. Are we going to provide any new plantings on the property to offset any of the clearing? We are going to provide some additional landscaping, and that's on the landscaping plan?
I don't think it is.
All right, we'll provide, obviously, additional landscaping. We'll provide that plan to Mr. Barry and to Mr. McClellan. Any fences or walls proposed here, other than the retaining walls?
No, just the retaining walls we spoke about.
Okay. And paragraph 10 deals with type of lighting. I'm assuming the type of lighting that's going to be provided here will be motion-activated lighting. It's not going to be on all night, typical to any other residential dwelling. 11 deals with any accessory improvements here, such as pools, decks, patios. None are proposed at this point in time?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously, we'll pay whatever development fees are necessary under your ordinance. All right, so I think, hopefully, John, I think we addressed any of your concerns. If you've got any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a few questions, a few follow-up items. So, I know we don't, am I correct in saying we don't have the architect to testify this evening? We have the plans that were submitted? Okay. And generally, you know, the architecture of the dwelling is not necessarily before the board as a single-family home. However, considering the site constraints, the design of the dwelling may play into different aspects of how the property is developed and modified. Without passing any judgment on the design in particular, it appears to be a fairly, for lack of a better word, cookie-cutter design. It doesn't look like a house that was designed to fit into a challenging topography. It looks like a house that was designed to fit on a flat plane. So with that said, and this goes into some of these comments and questions about ways to change the footprint of the house to minimize disturbance, I wonder if there's a different architectural approach here that may limit some of the impacts on the site. And in particular, you know, one of the comments that I think I indicated, the second floor of the proposed dwelling, the floor plan is smaller than the first floor because there's a 2-story high living room and so forth. You know, those types of design elements may be appropriate for some houses, but when you're in a space-constrained area and you want to maximize your floor area that's usable in the house, maybe that's not the appropriate design element. So those types of considerations, and I know this isn't for Mr. DiBenedetto, but just to expand on that comment a little bit through some testimony. The other, I've heard the C1 and C2 testimony. What I haven't heard, and you know, I may have missed it, but I haven't heard anything about the negative criteria that goes along with either facet. You know, those are essentially the affirmative case, and then there's always got to be a discussion about what are the impacts, and are there any substantial impacts? So we've heard a lot about the engineering challenges and a lot about retaining walls that may be located in the public right-of-way and so forth. And I haven't heard planning testimony to tie all of that into what's going on with the either C1 or C2 approach to the variance relief. The other item, number 11, I understand that there are no accessory improvements proposed at this time, but it does speak to the appropriateness of this property for residential development. A future homeowner of a substantial house may want a deck, may want a pool, may want usable outdoor space, and to the extent that there is disturbance to build the house, I wonder what additional disturbance may be necessary in the future to accommodate some of those improvements that a homeowner might want. So as much as we can think about that as part of the big picture now, I think that's an important consideration for understanding the size of the house that may be appropriate for the property. And then I appreciate we'll see a landscape plan at some point that may offset some of the tree planting requirements. And I think, number 6, could you confirm the setback of the proposed dwelling? But I think there was a discrepancy between the table on the first sheet and then what's actually shown on the site plan. Just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
I believe it's 18.83 feet.
That's the side yard setback to the north, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the front yard setback to the proposed, yeah.
It's 27.98 feet.
That's what the table says. Is that what's shown on the drawing?
I can't scale it right now. And you know what?
Okay, well, we can, I don't need to put you on the spot. I would just ask you to take a look at that and tighten it up if you need to.
We've got a scale.
It will be updated. It's somewhere closer to 40 feet.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, points well taken from Mr. Barry. We will take them all into consideration. All right? Okay. Well, that concludes our testimony, at least for this evening. What I'd like, before you go to the public, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't mind taking a brief recess. I want to talk to my client and talk to the engineer about how long it's going to take to maybe do some of these revisions, whether they're even feasible, and then we can come back if that's acceptable to the board.
That's acceptable to me, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So we'll take
10-minute?
10-minute break?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. We reconvene at 8:45. Mr. Sachs? Yeah. Okay. Probably a good idea to give them the opportunity. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I've heard from Mr. Sachs, and I think if we have completed our commentary by the board, we can open up to public comments.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just so the board is aware, and I've spoken to your professionals, we appreciate the comments, that are both in the reports and were made this evening by your professionals. We wanted an opportunity to revisit the plan, to see if there is some way that we can abate the steep slope disturbance. And, we'll do that with both Mr. McClellan and Mr. Barry. We'll do that obviously on our time, but at least for this evening, we're not asking for a vote. We're not asking you to decide this application this evening, and we request that it be carried. Certainly, I know there's a lot of members of the public here. If they want to speak, we'd certainly like to hear what they have to say as well.
Thank you. So I think we can open public comment to both questions and comments. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Vice Chairman, just given I guess essentially the applicant's requesting for a continuance, which if the
Yes.
board is inclined to grant that, their case in chief would not be over at this point in time, and they would be coming back presumably with
Okay.
amendments to their plans, and would be putting on further affirmative proofs. I would also note that the gentleman who was here, your engineer, I don't know if he's still here or not, but he would additionally be subject to cross-examination if there are any members of the public who are interested in doing that. But given the nature of the continuance and the likelihood of probably new affirmative testimony if the plans are revised, I would advise that the continuance go forward and then just a regular public comment be opened as listed on the agenda, but that wouldn't necessarily be evidentiary to this application, but simply a public comment period for this meeting, with the application being heard at a further meeting.
And no questions of the expert?
Well, that's in the board's discretion. If we're granting the continuance as requested here, we would basically be shutting down the hearing for purposes of this applicant until they ask to come back. Alternatively, given that the expert is here, if we want to open it up for cross-examination, we certainly could. But if the plans are going to be changed, that may be a futile effort because the testimony is to plans that are going to be revised. I'm sorry
Okay,
if that was a bunch of
yeah, that's a good
word vomit.
Yes.
That's what us attorneys do. But basically, I think if we were to do cross-examination tonight, it would probably not make much sense because the plans sound like they're going to be revised. So if we grant the continuance and we shut down the application now, we could proceed to public comment. It just won't be cross-examination or any record testimony, but it would be an opportunity to hear from the public, if that makes sense.
Do you want a motion and a second to grant the continuance?
I think that would be appropriate. Mr. Sachs, do you have a timeline in terms of a future meeting for not renoticing, or would the board prefer that we renotice given the nature of the request?
Well, timeline is, I think we're going to need some time.
Okay.
Certainly, I don't think we're going to make your August meeting. Maybe what you could do is carry this till the September meeting. And certainly, if we needed any adjournment past that particular time, I'll notify your secretary. Certainly, I'd like it to be without further notice at this time. I'm not sure the plans are going to be substantially revised, but they will probably be revised to some degree. So,
Our September meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 4th.
all right, so why don't we, Rob, does that work for you? Okay. Okay. And I have no objection to public comment. I think Mr. Collins is correct. I don't think cross-examination of my witnesses on possible revised plans is going to add anything at this particular point. So, you know, if there's a burning desire of any member of the public to comment, we certainly are here to listen to it.
See if I can find my agenda.
So then we'll just need a motion to grant the continuous up to November
Sorry, real
1st.
quick, no.
Absolutely.
And just to confirm, for the record, Mr. Sachs, we're extending the time for the board to act.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so a motion would be ordered to grant the continuance to the September regular meeting of this planning board and to extend the time for this board to act in accordance with the same.
Okay, do we need a motion?
Yep.
Motion?
I'll second.
Very good.
And an all in favor is fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Move to continue. All right, so I'd like to go ahead and open to the public for public comment. So those of you,
And just a reminder, as I mentioned, this is just going to be a general public comment period. The plans are subject to revision, so if you're looking to comment in a way that's going to be evidentiary, meaning that it could impact the board's decision-making on this application, this is not your opportunity. That opportunity will come if this matter comes back at the September or at a subsequent meeting when we get to that portion of the application. We're not there yet. This is just a general comment period, and it won't be in the record.
okay.
And just please state your name and address for the record.
Jennifer Pinella, 193 South Main Street. Good evening, zoning board members. Thank you for the time that you spend on this board, keeping our beloved town's best interests at heart. The gentleman who purchased the lots on Christopher Street 19 years ago was made aware of the steep slope aspect of the property. He was told then that building on the property was not feasible. To request a hardship variance to gain a waiver for the environmental impact statement for something that he was well aware of is not fair to this board, and it's not fair to the many homeowners that surround that property. He knew going in, before he hired any development firms to draw up any plans of the steep slope variance in this town, he created this hardship on himself. What about everyone else's hardship when that cheap dry well system will not be able to accommodate the storage and release of the roof runoff, street runoff, and sidewalk runoff, all impermeable surfaces that have nowhere to go but down to the houses and vehicles below? How would you know what hardship you are incurring on other homeowners without that environmental impact statement? It would be irresponsible of the board to all of the other homeowners in the area if this environmental impact statement were waived. These questions we as homeowners lay before you this evening cannot be answered without it. We feel sorry for the gentleman that spent so much time, money, and effort was expended for this project, but it's not fair to the board, the town, or the homeowners who may be negatively impacted. And we won't know how we would be negatively impacted without that environmental impact statement. It is our understanding that the borough designated South Main Street as a rehabilitation area. What impact would this development have on that rehabilitation of Main Street? Wouldn't using Christopher Street to create a small walking path be more in line with the redevelopment plans of South Main Street? The town could use a nice tree-covered path to enjoy working on. Everyone would benefit from such a development. Isn't this more of the direction we want it to go? Perhaps the town would consider purchasing his property from him. Looking into grants from the state or county to accomplish this may be an option worth looking into. We only ask that the board uphold its responsibility of protecting the homeowners around this project by resisting the variance for hardship. Thank you.
State your name and address.
Ed Abrams, 7 Henry Street. Jennifer, you said it very well, and thank you for those unbelievable comments. We're all in agreement with what you said. Our big thing is, why allow an exception to the steep slope requirement for one house that is yet not to be built on a paper street? There's going to be a significant unknown impact on many existing tax-paying homeowners for one house that is not conforming to the existing set of building and slope requirements. We also feel that we're not hearing the big picture, that the start of development of Christopher Street will lead to future development, and the lack of adhering to the steep slope requirements that are in existence. We also would have liked that, this is the second, third, fourth time that this project has been in front of the planning board. And I feel like they've had shot after shot after shot to come in front of the board and present a plan, and every time we're here, it's just delayed and put off. Are we waiting for a new planning board? Why are we continuing to delay the inevitable? As the attorney mentioned, it's a house that could fit on a photo map. And you know what? Maybe there is no house that fits here. I don't know why we allow this to continue and allow a continuance and a continuance. I feel like the board should have voted tonight, denied the application, and we'd be done with this. Because they're not going to be able to conform to the steep slope requirements. It would have been a lot simpler. We could have all been, moved on with our lives. But we appreciate your efforts here. We appreciate the feedback. And, we'll be back in September in full force. Thank you.
Hi, Planning Board. My name's Esther O'Brien. I'm at 5 Henry Street. When I was reading Mr. Barry's report, there's a section that says that disturbance shall be prohibited except, and one of the exceptions is to stabilize steep slopes. And I'm like, okay, this plan seems to do the total opposite. It's going to just cause more problems, and that the environmental impact statement, I'm not sure how that can not happen. that seems like a very important part of this, and that if the owner of the property wants people to be feel confident about what he wants to do there, then have all the statements done, have the environment impact statement done to give us confidence that maybe this is okay. Right now, it feels like that's a problem and that they want it waived because it's just a single-family house. But yeah, it's a lot more than that. And thank you for listening.
Members of the board, my name is Michael Pinella. I live at 193 South Main Street. I'd just like to comment to the board about just kind of in keeping in line with keeping in mind the effect of this project on everyone in town, and on 2 points specifically. Number one, with regard to that environmental impact statement, I think that's very important because I think it's easy to overlook the importance of our green spaces and impermeable surface areas, even if they don't, on the surface, appear to be very large. Anyone who was living in town at the time when Hurricane Irene struck may remember how badly Milltown was affected by flooding. And covering up the areas of our town where water can percolate naturally into the water table, slowly be attenuated by the pore space in the rocks, slowly back through our watershed to the Lawrence Brook. Having impermeable surface areas, such as an additional street, such as a house with a roof, ducts all that water immediately into our waterways. It will, and I think not having that statement just kind of sort of clouds I haven't really heard anything about the stormwater aspect. I'm not exactly sure if that's dealt with in the environmental impact statement or if that's in some of the other engineering materials. I personally haven't heard anything about this, and it's something I'd like the board to keep in mind. And then also, we were discussing, or we weren't discussing, rather, it was discussed earlier, the aspect of the retaining walls and their height. I would be curious to know what the maximum height of some of these retaining walls will be, especially if they're going to be butting up and taking up some space on a public right-of-way, because this is a neighborhood in which many children live, and I'd be curious to know what sort of risk that poses, children clambering up on the wall, the potential for falling and being injured. Thank you very much.
Good evening, board members. I live on 6 Henry Street, and
And your name?
Ronald Camp. And my family and I, we moved here in 2014. And when we were looking for property, we checked other locations and areas, and we came across some properties that says, we got green spaces back here. I saw spots. And I said to myself, that's a great idea, to save these spaces for the future children and members of our community. Now, I look at now a whole natural area up there. It's a green space. And like recent people said, we should develop it as a path area, a green area that future generations can enjoy. Why are we destroying it? For the development of one house, one mega house, over a community of 3,000 people and the future children generations of our community. As it was pointed out, this land was not developed because of the defects it had. So why are we considering it now? And the other fact I don't like is this. If you pay the piper, you call the tune. We've listened to expert engineers here, but you know what? Do we have our expert engineers doing an analysis of this? And if this property owner is so sure that his retaining walls are going to work, would he consider setting up a contingency fund that would protect all the owners of the properties down that slope from future flood conditions, where that fund would be drawn upon without me going to get a lawyer in litigation and having an expense? Is he so sure those retaining walls are going to work? And my answer is no, they're not going to work. Another thing the town should consider, the emergency vehicle and the snow removal. When the snow is plowed down that street, it's going to go down to the dead end. We're going to have accumulation of mountains of snow at the dead end, putting pressure on the retaining walls at that location. And when that water thaws out, it only goes downhill. So I don't think this is a good plan for the community and for the future generation and the children of our community. Let's take this green air, see if we can get some grants and make it a walking path, a nice area. Why destroy it? We should also consider, and people who live in Milltown should also realize, you hear plenty of sound from the turnpike. Do you notice the difference in the sound when you had the leaves in the trees in the summer? The trees provide a barrier for sound. We're taking away that sound barrier, the traffic sound from Main Street. We're also taking away the runoff potential that the roots prevent the chemical pollution from the spillage of oil and tire wear from Main Street onto our properties coming down. So my family and me and people in this area are against the development of this property. And I feel the board should take all of that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Feng Kai, 181 South Main Street. So my property is on the lot 8. Yeah, it's on the lot 8 here. Yeah, here, right? That is only, it's a back to the 23. That is half. So the half of my property is adjacent to this project, and another half is still old one. So that is looks very awful because every time when in the future, if this project is finished, right, when I go back to the backyard and the landscape is changed. So on the right side, maybe the new property. On the left side, it's still the old one. So that is looks very awful, right? And another one is I don't hear any analysis on the impact to the surrounding properties. See, our property is higher. The land is slope to that land, right? So every time when there is a heavy rain, I can see the water just go from my backyard to that land, right? So in the future, if this project is completed, so I don't know if we allow the water just to go through their property, because I saw there's the house in the middle of the land, right? So if we just allow the water go through the building, that is too bad for the building. But if they did something to stop that water, I just worry about if the water could accumulate on my backyard. So that could be the bad impact to my property. So I haven't heard any analysis, anything about that. So I hope, the developer to do something on that one, the landscape and the potential hazard impact to the neighbor. Yeah, so that is my concern. Yeah, thank you.
Vice Chair, if I could just jump in and just remind everybody, this was carried to September, so all of this testimony, if you want it on the record, is not right. I mean, I just want to stress that so everybody understands.
None of this is going to be part of the record for
Right.
the application itself. So, whether it's the board's ultimate determination in voting, it can't consider anything that's being said here. And if this ever got litigated, this wouldn't be part of the transcript.
Right, so if these comments, if you want them on the record and to be part of the hearing, September is the meeting to have it. So I'm not saying don't come up and talk, I'm just saying that this has been carried to September, so none of this can be considered by the board. I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Are there any other comments?
And this is public comment for anything.
Hearing, oh, I have one more, okay.
John Judges, 8 Center Street. I want to talk about the property on 4 Center Street, the Hitco property. 4 years ago, this property was put up for a subdivision, and they had, what they had was a Zoom call, and they had all the neighbors join in on the Zoom call, and we all expressed our concerns with our water issues. Myself, some of my neighbors actually have bad water issues where my house is actually, the front corner of it is held, the walls are held back with 6 pilasters because of the water pressure coming down from the Hipco property. My neighbor in back of me also was impacted. His wall is also compromised. So back then, they proposed a drainage system to run through the property and tie in with Janet. They didn't get the approval by the neighbors, so it was knocked down. Okay, 4 years goes by. We, the neighbors, figured the plan failed until recent, just within a month and a half ago. we seen a sign go up on the property, a for sale sign, and I investigated and found out that the subdivision of this property was approved. Now, I can't figure out how it was, we're in an R10 zone area, which requires 10,000 square and an 80-foot front. By subdividing, it was a 150-foot lot across. It was 75 by 100, so they failed on both parts of that, and yet it passed. Okay, even though the original drainage system was knocked down. Come to find out that there was a revised drainage system that was voted on and passed by the planning board, which we knew nothing about until we seen that for sale sign go up. We investigated what was going on and all, and we spoke at 2 council meetings to get their attention about this. I'm wondering if the planning board realized the impact that developing this property would have. Okay, the property, the downslope is 68 feet at the street level, 52 at the back of the property. That's a 16-foot drop. Okay, the water, by putting a house up there, removes that impervious ground that used to absorb a lot of that water. Most of that water now is going to come around the back towards my property, which is the lowest spot there, and then continue down to the houses below me. Their plan was to put a dry well in the back and a retaining wall, which, in my opinion, the dry well is going to gather all that water from the house and all and leach down to my other neighbor. Okay, the front water is going to come to me, and the other fellow in back who is also his walls are also compromised. Another issue is the trees there. There's 3 mature pin oak trees against my property. Okay, they're 70-foot tall trees. They're going to remove one of these trees, and the other 2 are staying, but according to the prints I have here that I got from town, where they're going to dig the foundation of this house. I don't know if you know, the root system of a 70-foot oak tree goes out probably twice the distance of the canopy of the tree itself. Okay, this house that they're proposing is like 10 feet off of this tree, which means that by excavating, they're going to be disturbing the root system on these trees. Okay, the other side of the tree is my house. Okay, if they're going to weaken these 2 70-foot monsters with the storms we've been having through the years and the winds, it could potentially loosen that tree and head in my direction. That's an issue there. Another issue is the trees. These trees gather a lot of water. They can take in supposedly 100 gallons a day, these trees. By removing one tree, that's an impact in what was normally absorbed. In any case, this plan here, I'd like to see it revisited if we could, because it's affecting myself and my other neighbors downstream, and that's it, I guess. That's all I got right now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Okay.
comment.
Yes.
Would you like me to provide just a little perspective from the professional standpoint on that application?
Yes, I would, yeah, because I'm not that familiar with it. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Vice Chairman. I believe the commenter was commenting regarding an application that actually was approved by this board back in 2020. It was a subdivision that was perfected by deed. The issue that came up most recently is that the subdivision required compliance with stormwater management, and they had originally intended to do so in a certain manner, which was specified in the subdivision deeds. They subsequently came back to the board and asked to comply with the stormwater requirements an alternative way. And administratively, that was reviewed by the board engineer and determined to be compliant with the stormwater regulations, and as a result, the board was then obligated to amend the subdivision deeds to incorporate the amended stormwater management plan. So in truth, this was all an application that was from several years ago, so if there was any disagreement or concern about it, it would have needed to have been appealed at that point in time. And just so the public is understanding, the board here has, the board professionals have an ongoing obligation to administer the requirements of the board resolutions as they're written. So in this case, as long as the proposed stormwater was compliant with the applicable regulations, it's subject to approval. The board doesn't have discretion to revisit the approval because of, any ongoing considerations, simply whether the stormwater management was compliant or not. In this case, the revised proposal was compliant.
Thank you for that additional information.
All right. Hi, my name's Kurt Morrow, live at 57 Janet Court. I'm John's neighbor on the downside of the hill. I also attended the past couple board meetings, and we were recommended to come here just to voice our concerns. Yes, I know we only technically had 45 days in 2020. I personally did not purchase this home until 2023. I know most of you guys probably weren't even on the board in 2020. I'm just pretty much up here to voice my concerns and to possibly motion for reconsideration. I know that is allowed even after 45 days, based on new evidence. So at the time, the homeowner, I reviewed the notes from the Zoom call. She voiced her concerns about the water issues, but she did not voice her concerns or her issues with her foundation. When I went to purchase the home, she had to have her foundation repaired. The foundation was compromised due to the hydraulic pressure in the ground, which that obviously was not addressed. Only the inside of the foundation was fixed. And there's permits out on that, so that is, public knowledge. So in my eyes, to me, that's new evidence that was not really presented at that time when I reviewed the notes about the concerns with not just the water issues, but also the other issues that can cause on the house and the neighboring houses. Also, I didn't hear too much about the, when I was reviewing the notes, about the potential house and the adverse effects it could have on the property values around. Yes, this home will be a new construction. However, it's going to be on a much smaller lot. As my neighbor said, we'll have 10,000 square feet. Now we have two 7,500 square foot lots. The house will be smaller than the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. And I did have a study done by a realtor that works for Coldwell Banker that I can present if needed that proves that this will actually decrease the value of our homes. So I just wanted to present that and just, hope that there could be some type of reconsideration even though the 45 days has passed, as I was not present in 2020 at the current house. I was on Van Leeuwen. And that's pretty much all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sachs.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think the last two speakers were not referring to my client's property. They were
correct.
talking about a subdivision that has nothing to do with the particular application that's in front of you this evening. Thank you.
Correct.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Stankovitz, 53 Janet Court, Milltown. Kurt, who previously spoke. I just want to confirm, if somebody could do a little bit of research, that the board was aware that there is an active spring on the properties that are in question. And I just want to make sure that that was disclosed to the board back in 2020, and it is active on a daily basis. You could audibly hear water going through the property, and I just want to make sure that the board was given full disclosure at the time that was done, because the addition of a dwelling on this non-conforming lot is certainly going to add to significant drainage
which is already a problem on a very marshy, wet property there. So I just want to confirm that was handled and disclosed above board. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other comments, so I'd like to have a motion to close public comments.
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. I think we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Good night, everyone.
Go now.